Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. If you want to know what's coming next and get updates from me, Bree, sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. Or you can follow the show on YouTube, where we have playlists for all the stories. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, Tuesdays, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Chapter 22, The Procession, Part 1. Before Hester Prynne could call together her thoughts and consider what was practicable to be done in this new and startling aspect of affairs, the sound of military music was heard approaching along a contiguous street. It denoted the advance of the procession of magistrates and citizens on its way towards the meeting house, where, in compliance with a custom thus early established and ever since observed, the Reverend Mr. Dimsdale was to deliver an election sermon. Soon the head of the procession showed itself with a slow and stately march, turning a corner and making its way across the marketplace. First came the music. It comprised a variety of instruments, perhaps imperfectly adapted to one another and playing with no great skill, but yet attaining the great object for which the harmony of drum and clarion addresses itself to the multitude, that of imparting a higher and more heroic air to the scene of life that passes before the eye. Little Pearl at first clapped her hands, but then lost, for an instant, the restless agitation that had kept her in a continual effervescence throughout the morning. She gazed silently and seemed to be borne upward, like a floating seabird, on the long heaves and swells of sound. But she was brought back to her former mood by the shimmer of the sunshine on the weapons and bright armor of the military company, who followed after the music and formed the honorary escort of the procession. This body of soldiery, which still sustains a corporate existence and marches down from the past ages with an ancient and honorable fame, was composed of no mercenary materials. Its ranks were filled with gentlemen who felt the stirrings of martial impulse and sought to establish a kind of college of arms, where, as in an association of Knights Templars, they might learn the science, and so far as peaceful exercise would teach them, the practices of war. The high estimation then placed upon the military character might be seen in the lofty port of each individual member of the company. Some of them, indeed, by their services in the Low Countries and on other fields of European warfare, had fairly won their title to assume the name and pomp of soldiership. The entire array, moreover, clad in burnished steel and with plumage nodding over their bright morions, had a brilliance of effect which no modern display can aspire to equal. And yet, the men of civil eminence who came immediately behind the military escort were better worth a thoughtful observer's eye. Even in outward demeanor, they showed a stamp of majesty that made the warrior's haughty stride look vulgar, if not absurd. It was an age when what we call talent had far less consideration than now, but the massive materials which produce stability and dignity of character a great deal more. The people possessed, by hereditary right, the quality of reverence, which, in their descendants, if it survive at all, exists in smaller proportion and with a vastly diminished force, in the selection and estimate of public men. The change may be for good or ill, and is partly, perhaps, for both. In that old day, the English settler on these rude shores, having left king, nobles, and all degrees of awful rank behind, while still the faculty and necessity of reverence were strong in him, bestowed it on the white hair and venerable brow of age, on long-tried integrity, on solid wisdom and sad-colored experience, on endowments of that grave and weighty order which gives the idea of permanence and comes under the general definition of respectability. These primitive statesmen, therefore, Bradstreet, Endicott, Dudley, Bellingham, and their compeers, who were elevated to power by the early choice of the people, seem to have been not often brilliant, but distinguished by a ponderous sobriety rather than activity of intellect. They had fortitude and self-reliance, and, in time of difficulty or peril, stood up for the welfare of the state like a line of cliffs against a tempestuous tide. The traits of character here indicated were well represented in the square cast of countenance and large physical development of the new colonial magistrates. So far as the demeanor of natural authority was concerned, the mother country need not have been ashamed to see these foremost men of an actual democracy adopted into the House of Peers, or made the Privy Council of the sovereign. Next, in order to the magistrates, came the young and eminently distinguished divine, from whose lips the religious discourse of the anniversary was expected. His was the profession, at that era, in which intellectual ability displayed itself far more than in political life. For, leaving a higher motive out of the question, it offered inducements powerful enough in the almost worshipping respect of the community to win the most aspiring ambition into its service. Even political power, as in the case of Increase Mather, was within the grasp of a successful priest. It was the observation of those who beheld him now that never, since Mr. Dimsdale first set his foot on the New England shore, had he exhibited such energy as was seen in the gait and air with which he kept his pace in the procession. There was no feebleness of step, as at other times. His frame was not bent, nor did his hand rest ominously upon his heart. Yet, if the clergymen were rightly viewed, his strength seemed not of the body. It might be spiritual and imparted to him by angelic ministrations. It might be the exhilaration of that potent cordial, which is distilled only in the furnace glow of earnest and long-continued thought. Or, perchance, his sensitive temperament was invigorated by the loud and piercing music that swelled heavenward and uplifted him on its ascending wave. Nevertheless, so abstracted was his look, it might be questioned whether Mr. Dimsdale even heard the music. There was his body, moving onward, and with an unaccustomed force. But where was his mind? Far and deep in its own region, busying itself with preternatural activity, to marshal a procession of stately thoughts that were soon to issue thence, and so he saw nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing of what was around him. But the spiritual element took up the feeble frame and carried it along, unconscious of the burden and converting it to spirit like itself. Men of uncommon intellect who have grown morbid possess this occasional power of mighty effort, into which they throw the life of many days and then are lifeless for as many more. Hester Prynne, gazing steadfastly at the clergyman, felt a dreary influence come over her. But wherefore or whence, she knew not, unless that he seemed so remote from her own sphere and utterly beyond her reach. One glance of recognition, she had imagined, must needs pass between them. She thought of the dim forest, with its little dell of solitude, and love, and anguish, and the mossy tree trunk where, sitting hand in hand, they had mingled their sad and passionate talk with the melancholy murmur of the brook. How deeply had they known each other then? And was this the man? She hardly knew him now, he moving proudly past, enveloped as it were in the rich music with the procession of majestic and venerable fathers. He, so unattainable in his worldly position, and still more so in that far vista of his unsympathizing thoughts, through which she now beheld him. Her spirit sank with the idea that all must have been a delusion, and that, vividly as she had dreamed it, there could be no real bond betwixt the clergyman and herself, and thus much of woman was there in Hester that she could scarcely forgive him, least of all now, when the heavy footstep of their approaching fate might be heard nearer, nearer, nearer. For being able so completely to withdraw himself from their mutual world, while she groped darkly and stretched forth her cold hands and found him not. Pearl either saw and responded to her mother's feelings, or herself felt the remoteness and intangibility that had fallen around the minister. While the procession passed, the child was uneasy, fluttering up and down like a bird on the point of taking flight. When the whole had gone by, she looked up into Hester's face. "Mother," said she, "was that the same minister that kissed me by the brook?" "Hold thy peace, dear little Pearl," whispered her mother. "We must not always talk in the marketplace of what happens to us in the forest." "I could not be sure that it was he. So strange he looked," continued the child. "Else I would have run to him and bid him kiss me now before all the people, even as he did yonder among the dark old trees." What would the minister have said, Mother? Would he have clapped his hand over his heart and scowled on me and bid me be gone? What should he say, Pearl? Answered Hester, save that it was no time to kiss, and that kisses are not to be given in the marketplace. Well for thee, foolish child, that thou didst not speak to him. Another shade of the same sentiment in reference to Mr. Dimmesdale was expressed by a person whose eccentricities, or insanity, as we should term it, led her to do what few of the townspeople would have ventured on, to begin a conversation with the wearer of the scarlet letter in public. It was Mistress Hibbins, who, arrayed in a great magnificence, with a triple ruff, a broidered stomacher, a gown of rich velvet, and a gold-headed cane, had come forth to see the procession. As this ancient lady had the renown, which subsequently cost her no less a price than her life, of being a principal actor in all the works of necromancy that were continually going forward, the crowd gave way before her, and seemed to fear the touch of her garment, as if it carried the plague among its gorgeous folds. Seen in conjunction with Hester Prynne, kindly as so many now felt towards the latter, the dread inspired by Mistress Hibbins was doubled and caused a general movement from that part of the marketplace in which the two women stood. Now what mortal imagination could conceive it? Whispered the old lady confidentially to Hester. Yonder divine man, that saint on earth as the people uphold him to be, and as, I must needs say, he really looks. Who now that saw him pass in the procession would think how little while it is since he went forth out of his study, chewing a Hebrew text of scripture in his mouth, I warrant, to take an airing in the forest. Aha! We know what that means, Hester Prynne. But truly, forsooth, I find it hard to believe him the same man. Many a church member saw I, walking behind the music, that has danced in the same measure with me, when somebody was fiddler, and it might be an Indian powwow or a Lapland wizard changing hands with us. That is but a trifle when a woman knows the world. But this minister, couldst thou surely tell, Hester, whether he was the same man that encountered thee on the forest path? Madam, I know not of what you speak, answered Hester Prynne, feeling Mistress Hibbins to be of infirm mind, yet strangely startled and awe-stricken by the confidence with which she affirmed a personal connection between so many persons, herself among them, and the evil one. It is not for me to talk lightly of a learned and pious minister of the word, like the Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of the Scarlet Letter. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You can check out the show notes or our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media at Bite at a Time Books.